From failed escapees to fumbling thieves, most crooks aren't criminal masterminds, and in fact, countless crimes are committed by absolute numbskulls. So today we're going to examine a criminal lineup of trashy thieves and masters of disguise as we take our patrol through the dumbest criminals who must not want their freedom. Pug life. Dogs are supposed to be a man's best friend, and the theory was tested in 2023 when a drunkard from Springfield, Colorado tried to make his pooch take the blame for a crime that he'd committed. The perp visited a bar with his pup and drove home, despite being over the legal limit. Then he made the situation even worse by speeding and getting stopped by the cops. He knew that he'd be arrested for driving under the influence, so when he pulled over, he put his dog in the driver's seat and hopped out of the car. And then when the cops reached the vehicle and found the dog behind the wheel, the owner claimed that he hadn't been driving, implying that the pooch had been the one speeding. Unfortunately, the cops had watched the entire situation unfold from their squad car, and the driver was clearly drunk. So they arrested him and charged him with driving under the influence, speeding, and resisting arrest. Springfield police stated that the dog was let go with a warning and given to a friend of the owner. And although they didn't reveal what breed it was, the pet was definitely about that pug life, and it got away scotty-free. They also didn't name the driver, but the culprit was a drunk moron from Springfield, so I think his identity is clear.
Wait! I shouldn't listen to myself! I'm drunk!
Invisible criminals. In 2002, an Iranian bank robber decided to skip the all-important step of choosing a cunning disguise when he walked into a Tehran bank without a mask and started openly snatching banknotes from customers' hands. Unsurprisingly, civilians immediately fought back and called the police. But the criminal was shocked, and when the cops arrived, he explained that prior to the robbery, he'd paid a wizard $625 to make him invisible. The sorcerer claimed that his spell would make the criminal disappear and allow him to perform a heist undetected. But unfortunately, the magic was a dud, and the only spell the criminal received was a long spell in prison. He definitely should have saved $600 and bought a ski mask instead. But surprisingly, he isn't the only bank robber who tried to disappear to perform a heist. Most kids know that lemon juice can be used as invisible ink, as the clear liquid turns brown when it's heated up. But unfortunately, MacArthur Wheeler and Clifton Johnson from Pittsburgh didn't fully understand this grade school concept, because they believed that if they poured lemon juice on their faces, it would make them invisible to security cameras. In 1995, they covered their cheeks in juice before robbing 2 Pittsburgh banks with no disguise. The lemon-scented bandits got away with $5,200 and stinging eyes. But the security cameras clearly captured their faces, so it didn't take the cops long to track them down. When the citrusy criminals were arrested, Wheeler reportedly shouted, "But I wore the juice!" However, that defense didn't hold up in court. He was sentenced to 24 and a half years in prison, giving him plenty of time to relearn grade school science, while proving that when life gives you lemons, you shouldn't squeeze them on your face and rob a bank. Dressing up. Buying a present for every child on Earth must cost Santa a ton of money. And it turns out St. Nick gets this cash in illicit ways. On the 23rd of December 2013, a bank in Port Orange, Florida, was robbed by Kris Kringle himself, when a criminal decided to hold them up with a Christmas present that he claimed contained a weapon. The heist worked, as Santa took money from a teller and left the package behind. However, when the local bomb squad arrived, they found the box was empty, and the criminal had been bluffing. In the end, his gamble didn't pay off because during the police's investigation, they discovered security footage from a local Walmart that showed a man in the same Santa outfit buying the wrapping paper used in the robbery. They were able to trace the purchase to a man called Mark London, and he was promptly arrested and sentenced to 8 years in prison. In 2014, another criminal Kris Kringle struck by robbing a post office in Melbourne, Australia. The sinning Saint Nick demanded money from the cashier before stuffing it in a giant sack and making his escape in a Jeep. Unlike Mark London, the bearded bandit was never caught or identified, so he might be the real deal. And if I was Melbourne PD, I'd consider searching for the criminal in the North Pole. Those criminals made the naughty list, but they aren't the only thieves who've donned intriguing disguises. In 2010, Dennis Hawkins decided to rob a bank in Pittsburgh while disguised as a woman. The blonde bombshell walked in with a BB gun, a wig, and a heavily stuffed shirt. But he didn't bother to shave his goatee, allowing the bank tellers to easily identify him as a dude in disguise. Hawkins actually made it out with the money, but instead of keeping a low profile, he immediately went to a gas station and tried to steal a car, where he was caught and arrested. His disguise linked him to the bank robbery, so the busty thief was busted, and he learned that when you pick out a disguise, you should probably try to cover your face, like this astounding porch pirate. Oh man, talk about criminal trash. This home security footage shows the moment that a thief successfully stole a package in Sacramento by wearing a trash bag and waddling to the front door. The homeowner, Omar Munoz, explained that although the criminal was never identified or caught, the package he stole contained 2 phone chargers that were worth less than $10. So the robbery was pointless, and all it achieved was ruining Omar's day, as both his phone and the criminal remained uncharged. Utterly stupid. Whether it's revenge, jealousy, or greed, establishing the motive for a crime can be difficult. And sometimes a criminal's actions are so bizarre that they're impossible to explain. In 2011, Jonathan Payton walked into a Walmart in Stafford County, Virginia, on all fours while wearing a full-body cow costume. He then stood up and filled his cart with 26 gallons of milk before waltzing out of the store and handing it out in the parking lot for free. When the Walmart employees realized that Payton hadn't paid for the milk and confronted him, the bovine bandit reportedly fled the scene and skipped to a nearby McDonald's. However, the customers there also called the cops due to Jonathan's erratic behavior. So the police were able to track him down, arrest him, and charge him with misdemeanor shoplifting for stealing $92 of milk. Jonathan never explained why he committed the bizarre theft, but every criminal needs a partner in crime, and I think I've found his dream woman. In 2008, Michelle Ann from Middletown, Ohio, was arrested for drunkenly chasing kids around her street and urinating on their neighbor's porch while dressed in a cow costume, giving a new definition to neighborhood beef. Unfortunately, Michelle didn't explain why she wore this strange outfit to go on her rampage before being charged with disorderly conduct. Fortunately, the judge saw through her disguise and sentenced her to a month in Middletown jail instead of the local dairy farm, ensuring she was appropriately punished for her crime. Still, after a month in the slammer, Michelle Ann was released to the streets. And it wouldn't surprise me if in the future, Michelle and Jonathan team up like a bovine Bonnie and Clyde to commit a cow-themed crime spree. Grain silos beware. Twinkle toes. Wearing a lousy disguise isn't the only way that a criminal's outfit can foil their plans. One night in 1993, Alfred Acree was selling the devil's dandruff out of his van in Charles City County, Virginia, when the police pulled him over. As the cops approached, Alfred grabbed his illicit substances, jumped out of the vehicle, and ran into some woods. The cops gave chase on foot, but they were unable to spot the criminal in the dark until his shoes started to flash with bright red lights. See, Alfred was wearing a pair of light-up shoes from LA Gear that activated every time his heel hit the ground. These sneakers were popular in the 90s, but they led the cops straight to Alfred's location. allowing them to catch and arrest him with over $800 worth of booger sugar in his pockets. Sorry, Twinkle Toes. You should have spent that money on more practical sneakers. Or you could have taken a leaf out of this next criminal's book and stolen them. In 2019, a woman in Venezuela tried to shoplift 8 pairs of jeans by putting them all on in the dressing room and waddling out of the store. But like Shakira, her puffy hips didn't lie, and she was immediately caught by staff members who took her to a back room and forced her to hand the stolen goods over. Man, and I thought double denim was too much. The woman was literally caught with her pants down, but she hasn't been publicly identified, and it isn't clear whether she was arrested. However, this video has amassed over 4 million views on Facebook, so her crime was punished with a pretty heavy dose of public humiliation. Signed confession. When CSI investigates a crime scene, they look for clues to reveal the perpetrator's identity, like DNA evidence, fingerprints, or ideally, a piece of paper signed with the criminal's full name. See, in 2018, Glenn Flory robbed a bank in Bentleyville, Pennsylvania, by asking a teller for a deposit slip before using it to write a threatening note demanding money. The teller then gave him $1,300 in cash, and when Glenn freely walked out of the bank, he thought he'd performed the perfect heist. But when the police arrived and examined the ransom note, they discovered that when Flory wrote on the safety deposit slip, his muscle memory kicked in, and he accidentally signed his real name on it. Bentleyville has a population of just 2,300 people, so the cops were able to track down and arrest the borough's only Glenn Flory around 4 hours after the robbery took place. When it comes to criminal calling cards, leaving a signed confession at the scene of your robbery is pretty dumb. But hey, at least Glenn's confession was a mistake, and he didn't voluntarily hand himself into the authorities. In 2012, the U.S. and Afghan militaries put out a $100 bounty on Mohammed Ashan, a Taliban commander who was suspected of plotting 2 IED attacks. They placed wanted posters all over Afghanistan's Paktika province, and a short while later, Mohammed Ashan willingly approached a military checkpoint and handed himself in, while demanding that he should be paid the cash reward. The soldiers arrested Ashan on the spot, and a biometric scan confirmed that he really was the Taliban leader. Of course, he wasn't paid the $100, and when a U.S. official was asked why Ashan turned himself in, they responded, "Clearly, the man is an imbecile." Remember, kids, sometimes honesty isn't the best policy. Failed getaway. The perfect getaway requires the perfect vehicle, and Hollywood's thieves have evaded the police in everything from souped-up sports cars to nimble Mini Coopers. But some criminals don't put much thought into their getaway car, and some of them don't bother to check that it's large enough to carry the loot that they're stealing. These burglars from Ciudad Bolivar, Venezuela, tried to steal a washing machine, but they didn't make a clean getaway because the appliance didn't fit into their mid-size sedan. As a group of Good Samaritans followed in hot-point pursuit, the criminals were forced to abandon the loot, allowing the civilians to carry the washing machine back to the owner's house. The thieves were completely unsuccessful, but they probably should have opted for a larger vehicle like a pickup truck, although even that always doesn't get the job done. In 2015, This criminal from Queensland, Australia, attempted to steal a gas station's ATM by dragging it out of the building with a chain hooked up to his truck. Unfortunately, the chain was a bit too short, causing it to repeatedly disconnect from the ATM and his vehicle. After a couple of failed attempts, the thief gave up and drove away, with an empty chain dragging along the asphalt. The man was never identified or arrested, but the video amassed over 1.5 million views online. So hopefully the fact that his blunder went viral turned him away from a life of crime. Yeah, I'm not too confident about that either. Selfie incriminating. We use our phones and tablets to message friends, make calls, and watch handsome YouTubers. So it's pretty stressful when your smart device gets lost or stolen. In 2013, Alan Engstrom found this out the hard way when he accidentally left his iPad on a flight from Phoenix to Denver. The airline was unable to find the tablet, and as a month passed by, Alan thought the device was lost. Until these photos from a mysterious stranger started appearing on his son's iPod. Alan realized that the goofy selfies were being taken on his iPad, and the tablet was automatically uploading them to the family's shared iCloud account. This confirmed that his device had been stolen, so he uploaded the selfies to Facebook, hoping that somebody would recognize the criminal. He even parodied her photos and considered uploading a picture of himself to the cloud with a sign that read, "I want my iPad." However, Alan ultimately decided against it, and when nobody revealed the criminal's identity, he stopped giving updates online. So it isn't clear whether he ever recovered the device. The thief was publicly shamed on social media, but that's a pretty light punishment for theft. And it isn't nearly as bad as the time that my iCloud photos got leaked. Still, this isn't the first time that a dumb criminal has shared their own confession online. In 2012, Michael Baker from Kentucky decided to impress his friends by siphoning gasoline out of a cop car. He got his buddy to take a photo of the crime before posting it on Facebook, which allowed the cops to immediately track Michael down and arrest him on misdemeanor charges. We've all posted embarrassing things on social media, but Michael really takes the cake, as he was able to add another photo to his Facebook profile, a mugshot. No escape. The stupidest criminals are usually caught by the cops and thrown in jail. However, lots of these dum-dums double down on their stupidity by attempting to escape from prison. In 2022, 4 prisoners in Ceará, Brazil, attempted to escape prison by digging a hole through the wall using a dismantled shower pipe before crawling to freedom. The first criminal slipped through the hole and escaped, but when Rafael Valadão attempted to follow him, the 225-pound prisoner got wedged in the crawl space. The other escapees couldn't push him through, so Rafael was forced to shout for help from some nearby guards. The guards snapped some photos with big smiles on their faces before calling the fire department to cut him out of the wall. The unsuccessful prisoners were ridiculed and escorted back to their cells. But to be fair, the plan would have worked if Rafael spent more time working out in the yard and less time eating junk food from the commissary. Other escapees have developed similar plans, like this Brazilian criminal from Santa Catarina who tried to escape his cell by squeezing through the food hatch. Unfortunately, the crook was larger than a lunch tray, and he got stuck in the tiny gap. The cops had to call the fire department to free him, and they started by pouring sunflower oil on his body to help him slip through. This didn't work, so they used power tools to cut the man out, before immediately placing him in another cell. Fast food thief. When you picture a heist, you probably imagine a team of criminals robbing a bank or an art gallery. However, not all thieves have such lofty aspirations, and in 2020, a man from Lawrenceville, Georgia, burgled a Taco Bell in the early hours of the morning by breaking through the drive-in window. He grabbed a laptop and a tablet, But all that thieving made him hungry, so he decided to cook himself a snack. Taco Bell always gives me the runs, but this guy didn't bother running away. Then, after eating his Crunchwrap Supreme, he was supremely tired, so he laid down on the floor to nap for 3 hours. Sleeping at the scene of a crime is pretty stupid, but when the burrito bandit woke up, the restaurant was still empty. So he climbed through the window and escaped with the stolen electronics. Amazingly, the criminal was never identified or caught. However, I think it's pretty lucky he robbed a Taco Bell instead of another fast food establishment. I don't think Ronald and the Colonel would let him get away so easily. Peculiar Pirate. So far, we've largely looked at petty low-life criminals. So let's move on to a genuine pirate who tried to escape the law by stealing a boat and sailing into the seven seas. In 2023, the police in Victoria, Canada, put out a warrant for the arrest of Jericho Labonte on charges of criminal harassment and mischief. Labonte was announced as a risk to public safety by police for the charges, and he went on the run. He soon appeared 235 miles away in Astoria, Oregon, when he trespassed onto the porch of the house that was featured in the 1985 movie The Goonies. While trespassing, Labonte recorded himself placing a dead fish on the house's porch before uploading the footage onto social media. This prompted the police to start searching for him in Astoria, but Jericho wasn't ready to turn himself in. So he headed to a nearby port and stole a small yacht before sailing into the ocean to make his escape. Unfortunately, a giant storm rolled in, forcing Jericho to call the Coast Guard and get airlifted to safety after his ship capsized. The Coast Guard didn't realize that they'd rescued a wanted criminal, and by the time the cops heard about the ordeal, Jericho had been treated in the hospital and released. However, his freedom was short-lived, as after a brief manhunt, the cops found him hiding out in a homeless shelter and arrested him. Jericho was hauled to jail and charged with theft, criminal mischief, and recklessly endangering another person. This gave him a rap sheet that Blackbeard would have been proud of, and in my opinion, it's established him as one of the strangest pirates to ever live. Down the drain. For law-abiding citizens, the idea of committing a crime and getting thrown in jail is absolutely terrifying. But it turns out there are worse places to get stuck than a cell. See, in 2023, a suspected package thief in Fayette County, Georgia, ran away from the cops and crawled inside a storm drain before discovering the pipe it led to was just 50 yards long. The cops gathered at both ends of the pipe and demanded that the criminal come out. But after an hour of negotiating, he still refused to cooperate. So the police led a canine unit called Axe into one end of the pipe, causing the criminal to rush the other side and surrender. Unfortunately, he got wedged in at the end of the tube, so the cops had to use the long arm of the law to pull him out of the drain as Axe nipped at his heels. The crook got out and was apprehended after a relatively brief time in the drainage tube, which is, strangely, a location type criminals seem to love hanging around in. In 2011, another group of criminals in Ceres, California, snatched Jared Mediero's phone out of his hand before throwing it into a storm drain. Those criminals sadly got away, but when Jared attempted to crawl into the drain to recover his phone, he got wedged for 40 minutes with his feet sticking out of the ground. Jared was thankfully rescued, but the lesson is clear. Whether you're fleeing from the cops or you're a victim of a crime, be sure to avoid tight storm drains. Thick as thieves. In Hollywood, heists usually involve high-speed police chases, as the criminals do everything they can to evade capture. In reality, the dumbest criminals often fail to get away from the crime scene. In 2016, this man from Jastrowie, Poland, tried to steal cash from a ticket booth at a train station, but he became stuck while attempting to squeeze through the security bars. The criminal tried to wriggle free, but after a while, the rail worker discovered this strange scene and called the cops and fire service. The firefighters had to war-saw through the bars to cut him free, but the cops immediately revoked this newfound freedom by giving him a ride to jail and charging him with attempted theft. The embarrassing incident taught the bandit to cut back on the kielbasa, but there are worse places to get stuck. In 2013, a man from Santa Catarina, Brazil, tried to break into a restaurant in the early hours of the morning by climbing through an oven's extraction chimney. Unfortunately, the flimsy chimney immediately broke under his weight, trapping him inside the metal tube. Luckily, a witness watched the break-in and had already called the cops, so the grease-stained criminal was soon cut free before being hauled off to jail. A similar situation occurred in 2017 when a criminal from Makakoba, Zimbabwe, was stuck in a chimney for 2 days after his gang tried to rob a local youth center. The gang members climbed in through the chimneys and stole 2 computers, a laptop, and a jacket. However, when this unlucky criminal became stuck, his crew bailed on him, forcing him to wait for help. 2 days later, the youth center's cleaner heard him shouting for help, and when he was rescued, he stunk of excrement, was covered in flies, and told his rescuers that he was starving. The criminal was arrested for attempted burglary, but in my opinion, he'd already suffered enough. I mean, if pooping your pants and going 2 days without a meal doesn't rehabilitate you, nothing will. Well, that wraps up the rap sheet of the dumbest criminals who must not want their freedom. Which stupid crook in my lineup was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.